and we are back. Let me give him a proper introduction here. Hall of Fame boxing promoter out of the fighting city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Mr. Russell Peltz.
How are you, Michelle?
We are doing well. How are you today, Russell?
Terrific.
Great. So we know you were out there in Verona, and we unfortunately were not able to attend the Hall of Fame festivities out there, but we know that you're a loyal one that goes out there every year, and wanted to just get some highlights from that weekend and talk about who was inducted and maybe some moments that you'd like to share with our listeners from Verona this weekend.
Well, I was really surprised at the size of the crowd at the banquet Saturday night. They had over 500 people, and I believe that was the second largest crowd. The only crowd that topped it was the year that Tyson and Stallone got inducted, and I was surprised for a few reasons. First of all, there was a fight down the street at Turning Stone on Showtime. There was a fight in New York on HBO. The day before was the Muhammad Ali funeral in Louisville, and honestly, it wasn't the strongest Hall of Fame class that they inducted when you consider that probably the most well-known inductee, Hector Camacho, passed away several years ago. So there was no really like Tyson or De La Hoya or Leonard or Hagler, even though a lot of them were there, not a really monster name being inducted this year, and yet they still had a sizable crowd.
So who were some of the guys that were inducted this year?
Well, the modern category was Camacho, Lupe Pintor, who was the WBC bantamweight champion in the early 1980s, and Hilario Zapata, a multi-light flyweight and flyweight champion from Panama. But probably this year the most recognizable names outside of Camacho and maybe Pintor were Harold Letterman from HBO Sports, the judge, Mark Ratner, former Chief Commissioner of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Colonel Bob Sheridan, longtime television announcer, Jerry Eisenberg, a wonderful columnist from the New York Star Ledger, still writing, and in the old-timer category, probably the most recognizable name was Petey Saran, who was featherweight champ in the early 20s, had about 150 fights, was only stopped one time by Henry Armstrong when Armstrong won the first of his 3 world titles, had over 102 wins, and a longtime trainer from New Orleans, Whitey Eisenalt, who trained fighters like Max and Bernie Ducason, Ralph Dupas, and Willie Pastrano.
In your legendary career, did you do any business with anyone that was inducted this year in the Hall of Fame by any chance?
Well, we none of the fighters. We had tried to make, when Jeff Chandler was WBA bantamweight champ and Pintor was WBC bantamweight champ, we tried to unify the title, but there was not enough money in it. And at the time, I recall, Pintor just didn't want to have anything to do with Chandler, although the other night at the banquet, he said he would have beaten him for sure. Of course, it's 36 years later, so there's nothing you can do about that now. Harold Letterman started coming to my fights in the early 1970s. He's a big Benny Briscoe fan. And, of course, everybody who had anyone fighting in Las Vegas always dealt with Mark Ratner, one of the, I would say that Mark Ratner, probably one of the top 3 or 4 commissioners in the 46 years I've been in the business.
So you've been in the business 46 years. What year were you inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame?
2004.
So talk to us about the day that you got the phone call saying that you were being inducted. Where were you? What did you do? How did you react?
Linda and I, my wife, we were driving home from a fight card at Foxwoods. It was like the 4th or... You're going to get me emotional here.
It's okay. You can cry on this show. You can cry, you can curse, whatever you want.
It was like January 4th or 5th, and we were halfway home. It's like a 5-hour ride. And my cell phone went off, and it was there was no caller ID, just the numbers, 315-697-7095, and I knew that was the Hall of Fame, and it was my 3rd year on the ballot. and I knew that this was the week we were going to find out who got on and who didn't. So Ed Brophy gets on. He says, Russell, Ed Brophy's sorry to be bothering you on a Sunday morning. You know, I mean, Ed, you got to get a new line. Because usually I'd say, hey, Ed Brophy, one of the all-time greats. What's up, dog? But instead I just said, hi, Ed, because my chest was pounding. And then he goes into his little speech where he says, you know, according to an international poll of boxing writers, historians, and Hall of Fame inductees, you've been chosen, and those were the last words I heard, because I took the phone and I held it out in front of me, and I started crying.
Oh.
So
that is
Linda's
a special story.
Linda's looking at me, and you know, our oldest son Matthew had just gotten married and was living in Toronto, and our youngest son Daniel was home from semester break from Indiana University, and you know, she wants to know what's wrong, because she'd never seen me like that, because for our entire marriage she'd accused me of being emotionally constipated. So she says, what's wrong? And I couldn't talk because I was shaking and crying, and I just handed her the phone. And so I don't know if Brophy even knew I wasn't listening anymore, because he's just still talking, and she took the rest of the phone call.
That's Linda, such a warrior, that one.
Actually, the best congratulatory line I got when I got home that week, Bobby Goodman, who was a longtime publicist, worked for the Guard and worked for Don King, he called me up one day and he said, Russell, what an honor. I'm really happy for you. He said, and anyway, any boxing promoter who's been in business at that time 35 years and is not facing a major federal indictment and it deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
You know, let's talk about some of the fighters today. Do you see any Hall of Fame worthy fighters out there that, you know, you say, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they have the ability to enter the Hall of Fame? Is there anyone that special today?
Well, it's not a question of special. It's a question of the standards being lowered. You know Floyd Mayweather is going to get in. You know Bernard Hopkins is going to get in. You know Manny Pacquiao is going to get in. Those are the three that are no-brainers. The Klitschkos are going to get in. I don't know who else. You know, it's. I like to wait till a fighter's career is over before I rate him. And I've said this many times. If Mike Tyson had retired in 1988, after he knocked out Michael Spinks in like 90 seconds, he would go down. He would have gone down in history as probably one of the 2 or 3 greatest heavyweight champions who ever lived. But he didn't retire in 1998, and as his career played out, his overall rating dropped. So right now, Mike Tyson's probably considered in the top 20. So while Gennady Golovkin is knocking people out and Andre Ward is beating people, it's the competition today is so weak, and whatever competition there is, everybody steers away from it. So it's hard to get a gauge. But you know Hopkins, Mayweather, and Pacquiao are going to get in.
And what about guys like Roy Jones Jr., who won't stop fighting long enough for the clock to start running? Because you have to be inactive for 5 years before the clock starts.
Right. Well, actually, Sugar Ray Leonard, when he got in, he wound up coming back and having another fight after his retirement, which was a shame. Yeah, sure, Roy Jones Jr. will get in. I'm sure there's others that I just can't think of right now. Is Holyfield in? Has he been retired 5 years? I can't even...
I want to say he was inducted last year, wasn't he? I thought, or was that Foreman?
No, Holyfield is not in. Oh, Foreman's in, yeah. Holyfield is not. So I guess it hasn't been 5 years since Holyfield's last fight. I know he fought in 2007. I'd have to look it up.
All right. Well, Russell, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some special moments from Verona and some highlights, and definitely sharing your story on getting that call and being inducted. It's such a great honor, and it's an honor to know you as well.
You made me cry on national radio. That's terrible.
Oh, that's okay. It's a beautiful story.
Okay. Always a pleasure.
Right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot. Have a good Monday.